here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
You know, that's so interesting to hear you say combining the BDSM with the sacredness, because that's something that I feel really, really passionate about, is bringing in some of this more profanity into spaces that are, you know, secret and that are conscious. And I've noticed I you know, my community has I would say my original community was more tantric oriented. And then I'd bring in the kinky toys and they'd be like, that's fine. And they'd be like,
I know, yeah.
You know, and over the years, I'm seeing more and more warmth and more like interest in it.
Yeah.
So how did you go into that path of combining those two, and what does that mean for you?
Ooh, another beautiful question.
Girl, I'm full of them.
I love it. Wait, remind me of your sign.
Of my
your like sun sign. Yeah, your astrology sign.
Libra.
Oh my God, of course, ruled by Venus and an air sign. So of course you have beautiful questions. I love it. I think for me, like, honestly, I have just always I'm super Aquarius and I'm a twin. And I feel like those things combined, like being my own person with my own interests and being true to who I am is like at the core of like my life. And it's at the core of like my spiritual path and my spiritual quest, if you will. And I have always like really dwelled in, been inspired by, and felt a lot of duality within myself, both as somebody who's like, you know, I feel like so many of our stories are like, we're too much and not enough. We're too this, we're not enough this, or like, we're too sweet, we're too mean. Like, I've definitely felt kind of that pull between these aspects of like what I've now kind of come to term my like heavenly or angelic self and like my underworld self, like these two notions of who I am. And when I started a kind of devotional relationship with the goddess Venus, who is the Roman goddess of love and sex and lust and glamour and beauty and value, I started working with like sex magic and orgasms as a way to honor her. And within that, I realized that I really also had space to explore my desires and the things that were like of interest to me and that turned me on. And that for me, a lot of it is BDSM. So I started incorporating like my exploration of kink in a like super intentionally solo manner, because I realized I was like waiting for partners to kind of like unleash this part of myself, or like waiting for partners to help me explore. And like, obviously it's a lot easier to explore these things with like somebody else, but it's not impossible to do solo, like, you know, self-tying or doing, for me, like I do a lot of candle magic in my witchcraft. So I started using body safe wax candles, and I could use with wax play. And, you know, like, yeah, it's not as fun as spank yourself, but you can definitely still do it. So like, I really made this conscious effort to incorporate these things that turned me on, that felt worthy of exploration, like in my heart. Like I knew that it was something that I had to do into my devotional practice with the divine feminine. And that has remained kind of like this beautiful, I guess, like center point to my practice and to my devotion. So I think for me, it's like, you know, like I'm really inspired by dichotomy and polarity. I really feel like that's one of my lessons. Like I had this moment a few weeks ago where it was like, wow, like I'm a twin. I was born on February 2nd. I was born at 10 o'clock at night, which is 22 o'clock, 22:17, 22 o'clock. So like, there's all these like repetitive like twos in my life. And you know, like I'm a Mexican Jew. I grew up in the deep South. I'm a witch. Like I've definitely felt this pull towards like these different kind of dichotomies. And I think for me, integrating BDSM with, you know, for me, like I'm a masochist. I do really like intense experiences, and I enjoy the feelings that I get from being like, from experiencing pain alongside pleasure. Like it felt like that subversion is something that's always like turned me on, and adding that and making that kind of like a part of my spiritual journey, it kind of just, I don't know, it kind of felt natural. I think that, you know, when we have big reactions to things, whether it's like ew or like, wow, that it's something to pay attention to. And I think a lot of the time with kink, like when we first encounter something and we have that kind of yuck, it's like just something to keep an eye on. Cause a lot of the time it comes up as like something that can be a really big, like part of our kink or part of our exploration of BDSM, you know, like those things that you have intense reactions to are always worth taking note. And I feel like that, like kink is such an energy-based exchange that comes with so much structure, like a ritual where like I didn't really think about combining the two. It's just like, as I was exploring my sexuality as a part of my spiritual path, BDSM kind of fell into it as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because even just in your process, there's you facing the image of this acceptable female sexuality, and saying, I am choosing to follow what my desire is versus what this image is of what I'm expected to do, which I think is a very brave and courageous thing to do in our culture, where there is a lot of stigma and shame around desire or having desire. You know, that desire is something that's dangerous, or desire is something that's selfish. And so here you're even just modeling how we can heal through these dichotomies.
Yeah, thank you. I try. And I feel like part of it too is like, and this is something I've been really kind of musing over. I think I wrote about it for the last Diary of a Sacred Slut. Like this idea that, you know, like, I mean, obviously like my work is centered around witchcraft. Like that's a huge part of like who I am, of my work, of what I share, of how I share it, why I share it. And like, obviously, like, I feel like the world needs as many witches as possible. And if you feel the call towards that path, then that's all the invitation you need to be a witch. And I also recognize that like at the end of the day, historically, the witch lives outside of the confines of respectability. She is, I mean, the witch, I say she, because historically women have been connected with witchcraft. We've also just been marginalized, and like, you know, most of the major figures, even though witchcraft is a religion, not a religion, it can be, even though witchcraft is a spiritual practice, that is like there's a lot of women and femmes who practice, like, most of historically the voices who have been like the authorities on witchcraft have still been men. So for me, and that's the story of the occult in the West in general. I call the witch she, but the witch, if you can be any gender expression, you can be non-binary, you can be a dude, it doesn't matter. Witchcraft is for everybody, but I just wanted to add that caveat. The witch historically has been somebody outside of the confines of respectability. She has been the other, the outsider, the queer person, the slut, you know, she's been somebody with no kids. She has been the crone. The witch is a legacy of being ostracized, of being, you know, like hunted, of being outside of like what's acceptable. And I think that like, you know, there is this history of sexuality with witchcraft. I think that sexual energy is at the center of witchcraft. I think connecting to that as well, and recognizing that like that, you know, like witchcraft is part of like my legacy and part of my work. And part of that means that there's just going to be people who aren't okay with it. And like, I just got to say, fuck it, and be like the wild feral witch that I am. And, you know, what is I say? Feral witch winter, here we come.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.